Hello everybody, my name's Jody Rainey. I'm the president of the Heritage Conference, and with me is Terry and CISO. Terry is our social media director, so we have come up with an idea that we are going to try a little podcast just to help everyone understand the purpose of the Heritage Conference and what we do and how it all began. So we're going to try a title, and we're going to call this Our Heritage. But obviously, if somebody wants to make some comments and give suggestions for a name, so we're going to start just by kind of, like I said, the idea of this concept is for people to understand the beginnings of the Heritage Conference and our history, and then a little bit just about what's going on currently. So we'll have various guests from time to time and produce these shows. So our first guest today is Mr. Stan Bem. Mr. Bem, former principal of Purchase Line High School, 1967 to 2003. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Bem has a unique perspective in the fact that he was one of the founding fathers of the Heritage Conference, but he also was involved at the beginnings of the Appalachian Conference, the predecessor to the Heritage Conference for a lot of our schools. And also he has a lot of experience. He is a former PIAA official. He also was the former chair of the District 6 Committee, and before PIAA became a huge conglomerate like it is today, he was actually the president of the PIAA for a short period of time. So a lot of history here today with Mr. Bem, and so we'll get started. So Mr. Bem, as far as the Heritage Conference and that, I think we need to go back to the Appalachian Conference, and so can you talk a little bit about the Appalachian Conference, kind of how that began, and then a little bit about how that evolved to the point where there was discussion that we needed to maybe step away in what we form now, as we know today, the Heritage Conference?
Back in 1968, around the end of football season, a principal down at Ferndale High School, Dick Ribby, sent a letter out to small schools saying that he would like to talk about possibility of forming a conference for football for the smaller schools. My principal at that time was Clyde Oburn. He was also the athletic director, and I was a head football coach. He came to me and he said, "I can't go to the meeting, would you go? And if you think it's a good idea, say that we're in, and we'll go from there." So we met down at Ferndale, had a discussion about forming a league for what they called the smaller schools. At that time, with the PIAA classifications, there was only 4 classes, from A up to Quad A. And so he was talking about schools that would be in the lower 2 divisions. At that time, there was approximately, I think if I'm not mistaken, there were 8 schools that decided during that period of time that they would join that conference. Because what was happening in most of the schools, not only in Indiana County, but over in Cambria and Somerset County, there was no way in which you could fill your schedule. So there were small schools that were going off and playing larger schools. Purchase Line, for an example, was gone to Bellefonte, was gone to Somerset. Northern Cambria, for another example, was playing Indiana and Punxsutawney. So, there were things, throughout the whole area that people were traveling a lot just trying to fill a schedule. So the first year of the Appalachian Conference was 1968. It was basically just 8 schools at the time. And from there it grew over the 1970s and 80s, and it became quite a juggernaut in it, because we had people that had some real foresight as to what they wanted to do, and people wanted to join it. It was like anything else.
Of the schools that are now part of Heritage, like how many of those were the original 8 members of, say, the Appalachian Conference?
I would say, I'm trying to think of who they were. I think it was Purchase Line, United, Penns Manor. I'm thinking of who else. There was, I don't know if Salzburg, there was like 4 or 5. It wasn't completely. I know definitely Blairsville wasn't one of them, and I know that Homer City at that time wasn't one of them. With the original.
The original Appalachian.
Yeah, the original Appalachian. But as time grew, they came in and became part of it as it proceeds, throughout the time. And one of the people that from our county that really took it to the forefront was Alex Becerra, who was the athletic director at United. He got the idea of the Appalachian Bowl with the Appalachian Championship. And he lived in the Johnstown area, and he basically set it up that we were playing at Point Stadium with the two championship teams. And he also would have a media day prior to that where the teams would come in and they'd have a luncheon and do the whole thing. And what happened was that typical when you start to bring TV stations in and kids and everybody sees it, other schools wanted to join. And so from there it grew to where it includes schools from not only Indiana County, but you had Cambria County and also from Somerset County. And it grew to the point where you got two divisions. And what happened was that I felt that one of the downfalls of the conference was that they allowed member schools to pick and choose what they wanted to participate in. So as a school, if I didn't want to participate in the track, or track meet, I didn't have to. Same with football and different things. But it actually, I think, was part of the problem that came about. But in the 90s, we got to the point where there was a couple of schools that went rogue, if I want to use the term. They in turn were just piling up scores on the smaller schools. I mean, when I talk about schools being beat by 60, 65 points, say what you want to, we're in the education business. We're not in a professional league like the NFL where, the scoring counts as such. And it set a bad tone, for it. My involvement with the PIAA and that, I was able to know what was going on across the whole state, because at that time I was a president of the PIAA for 5 years, and as I conducted the meetings, and after the meetings you'd sit down with people and you'd talk about problems that are going on in the school, and so you started to pick up what was happening throughout the whole state of Pennsylvania on various things. And from that experience it really helped, because when I came back to the county they kind of looked at it as such. But in 1999 the superintendents were discussing it, and I assumed that they were getting public feedback from some of the schools that were getting pounded, by the rogue school that we had in the conference. And so they kind of sent a message and asked if we would meet to come about. I knew at that time that Virg Colombo from Wimber was working on the part of the Somerset County schools to form the Westpac, which would have taken a bulk of the schools out of the Appalachian Conference. So at Purchase Line High School in that fall, we met just the 7 schools of the county where the first meeting took place, and we kind of threw out some ideas that I had. And from my experience in the past, I threw out the idea that we wanted to encompass and highlight those students in a lot of different activities that may have not been shown before. And once that idea was thrown out on the floor, and I have to give all credit to Patty Gardner from Salzburg, she just picked that notion up, and all of a sudden she had all kind of ideas. Everything from band through home economics at the time, art, music, English, math, everything else, with it. So at that meeting, we kind of had a gist of what we wanted to do, and we talked about, highlighting it and going with it. And we come up with a couple of premises, for the conference at that time. One, if you were in for all activities. No ands, if, or, buts about it. 2, you would participate in each of these different things that we were going to have when we would rotate them among the schools, so that not one school or one area would have to deal with all the problems that go along with it. So as we were sitting there and putting it together, we come up with a couple of points that we were going to emphasize. 1, you're in it for all. 2, no matter what type of trophy that we give, doesn't make any difference. It was for football, the most valuable player, football, basketball, track, the band, everybody gets the same. There was no difference.
So that'd be how the the heritage plaque actually came to be then.
That's it.
So the plaque is really, in every one you win, it's the same symbol.
Same symbol.
But on the bottom, it tells you that it's for,
That's it.
either football, basketball, even academic. We have an academic champion,
Right.
stuff like that. Oh, that's
There's
interesting. Didn't know that.
That was how it came about, and everybody felt that it was important because in a school, you have students that are good in a lot of different areas, and sports. And I've been a sports advocate for things. It seems to get the most news in the newspaper and in different places. But what about those people that are good at math or good at English? Good at, even like in the old days they called it home ec, baking and those type of things.
Yep, family consumer sciences today.
Right, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it came about. So we had basically about 5 or 6 principle or ideas at the time. Then we decided, okay, there's 7 of us. For this to work, we needed 10, because that way it wouldn't be perfect for scheduling, given the opportunity. So we started to go around each of the schools, got to say, well, who do you think we should invite? And we had a list of at least, I think, 6 or 7 schools, because no matter where you're at, for example, down at Salzburg, they said, what about Leechburg? You went another direction, at Purchase Line, what about Northern Canberra? So it started to go. Somebody said, well, what about Black Lake? What about this school? What about that school? So finally, as we sat there, we came to another premises that the principals were going to vote, and when we had a majority, that's the schools that we were going to contact and go with it. So it ended up that the 3 schools that ended up being 1, 2, and 3 was Northern Cambria, Laurel Valley, and Ligonier Valley. And so the next meeting, then in turn, they were invited to it, and this is how we started to develop and get to the point of where it was located at.
So the beginning of building the bylaws and the Constitution that
Right.
we have today originated at once we got to 10 schools, and we started putting a structure to that.
Right. And then once we had the Constitution and the different things, then everybody went back to their board, and it was an easy sell. I mean, when you walk into a Board of Education and you got a wide range of people that are sitting on that, and they have maybe their grandson or granddaughter was in a band or a cheerleader or whatever the case may be, go with it. Another thing that really helped us along that time, a lot of private organizations were running competitions for cheerleaders, for band, for variety.
Tri-county cheerleading back at the time was huge.
All those different things, and it was a private enterprise that was doing it. It wasn't the schools, but our kids were out there selling stuff and making stuff just to compete in those particular areas, with it. So with that foundation, then we went to the boards, everybody got approved, and we started. First thing we did is we had a contest to see what the name of the conference was going to be, because it wasn't called Heritage when we were talking. It was just this idea.
Just the conference.
The conference, And so in turn, they submitted it out to the schools. We had all kind of drawings. I remember one, it stuck in my mind till today, that somebody took the 3 power plants in our area, Shalakta, Homer City, and down at Seward, and they called it Power Alley, the Power Alley Conference. And then Heritage was one of them, and it talked about our heritage with the coal mining industry and all the various farms and things of that nature. So there was a lot of unique proposals that were put by students, and again, the 10 principals sat there, decided on which one, they put them up, and we all voted, and that ended up with the name that we have today as the Heritage Conference.
So you talked a little bit about like the one school goes rogue, and in that particular school, I think we kind of can guess who we're talking about a little bit. So not only were they dominating in football at the time of the conversation, but they also dominated in a lot of other sports. And so I guess the question is, but in addition to that, I've always wanted to ask this question is, if I recall correctly, because as you mentioned, you weren't in everything. You could be in football, but not basketball. You could be in basketball, not football or track or whatever. So it was almost like Burger King. We were having it our way. And so, but I know at the height of football, there were 18 different schools. And so to determine who got to play in that Appalachian Bowl had to be a challenge to determine how do we get to that Appalachian Bowl game?
Well, part of the problem with that was that as they were working the schedule, schools would say, you know, I don't want to play Jody Rainey's Homer City team because they're going to be good this year. And so what happens is that you start to say, okay, you know, you guys don't have a good program, we'll let you go play somewhere else. Well, that isn't the way it has to be. You're in it for all, you know, and you in a small school league, if you look at the history of it, you're going to have schools that will have a good program for 2 or 3 years, and then they have it down here because of just the number of kids that are in the building. I mean, that's just the way it is. No one's going to dominate for decades. I mean, it goes up and down, and even if you look at the Appalachian Conference, there were periods of time that Homer City dominated, periods of time that United dominated, periods of time the Purchase Line was up in there, Penns Manor, and I could go on with all the other different.
Blairsville,
Yep,
Coach
Blairsville,
and
all this. You know, I mean, it was just, you know, up and down with cycles, if you wanted to
Laurel
say.
Valley with Coach Page.
No question about it. And Ligonier later on, you know, with it as such. So, you know, you go through that, and you have to accept it. And but that's what happens when you allow people to pick and choose, and it's human nature. Say what you want to if you're coaching. You think you got a good team coming, you want to play the best in the world. But if you think that, boy, this is going to be a tough year, well, then maybe I need to look for some schools out there that maybe I can compete with, and which is not the purpose of a conference. A conference is there for the good of the total.
Well, Greg Lazanik Sticks, he taught me one time, girls basketball, he said, Jody, when you think you're going to be really good, tell people you'll be average. When you think you're going to be average, tell them you're going to be bad. And when you know you're going to be bad, tell them you're going to be really bad. you guys make sure you're always over exceeding expectations.
Yep.
So is it safe to say then what the value of the Heritage Conference then is the fact that, like with the original 10 and today our 12 schools, that's really important to think about. It's the idea that the benefit of being in such a conference is you got that guaranteed schedule. You got everyone obviously has their school, like as principal and you know, being the president of the Heritage Conference, you know, I got to represent the conference, but I also got to represent my school in those meetings and decisions that we make. But sometimes we got to make little sacrifices maybe that isn't the greatest for our one school because it's going to benefit the whole. And so the mission is then, and as it is today, is to try to create as many positive and enriching experiences for kids that we can. And so I think what you've said earlier, that was basically the concept, is we have to be a united front in the mission of all of us in these 10 schools at the beginning have to do what we can to make sure that we are providing the best experiences for kids to enrich their experiences in academics, in athletics, in the arts or activities, you know. Those things, the value was going back to the mission of we're in this to create great experiences for kids.
No question about it, Jody. And the thing that you always have to remember as a building principal, high school principal, if you belong, and we all belong to the PIAA, and their basic premises is that the principal is the person responsible. He can delegate those duties to anybody he wants to, but the accountability of your program goes back to that individual. And that premises that you have to really remember the accountability is there, but you also have to remember that you're accountable for all the students that walk through that door. Doesn't make any difference what they're...
Not just the all-star quarterback,
no,
you got to be good for everybody.
Right, you know, you got people that are good in other areas. Some of them very excellent in other areas, and we wanted to show those individuals that they're just as good as the MVP on a football team, the MVP on a basketball team, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, and I was fortunate enough for two things for disclosure for a lot of people. Number one, I was a coach at Purchase Line. You were my supervising principal there as well, so that's kind of why I know a little bit more maybe of the history than most, because yourself, you know, I mean, all the people you talked about, Bill Wilf from United, obviously, and even athletic directors, John Bomboy, Jim Clapp, and now you're talking, you mentioned earlier, Patty Garner. Patty Garner was the principal at Salzburg at the time, and and if people know Patty, she ended up being the curriculum director at the IU 28 before she moved on to some other things in life too. And phenomenal academic mind, Patty was, for sure. Great individual. I've known her personally, and she's just a first class lady all the way. So when you talk to Larry about athletics, we know that when we associate conferences, we associate it with athletics. But where did the idea, you said about Patty, like really talking about the academic part and what we could do for band and even incorporating cheerleading and math and everything else. I believe to this day that was that a concept that we stole from someone, or was that something you guys brought? Because I think that is the uniqueness of the Heritage Conference to this day, is we are a place, any kid in the building has a place to be and to go. And so was that an idea that someone else had generated and we kind of borrowed from and built it ourselves, or was that kind of just something we felt we built, just kind of came out of these conversations about forming a new conference?
Well, I'd have to say it was the original idea of those people in there, for this simple reason that, and I'm going to use some of my experience that I had with the PIAA. I had a good friend from the city of Pittsburgh, District 8, Vern Phillips, who was their representative, and we used to travel to Harrisburg together. We'd meet down in Bedford and we'd ride in the car, and they had one unique thing down there that always impressed me, that I thought was great. They had what they call the Kelly Awards, where they would actually get somebody from one of the universities down there that would go to all the city schools when they had their musicals, and they would pick the most value, if you wanted to use it, the top performer, those types of things with it, and they would have a big to do about it and give out, trophies at the end, just like you would, I guess, the academic awards, that type of a thing, and it always stuck in my mind because I thought that was a hell of an idea. Because, as a principal, when you go to those different activities, you go to musicals, you go to plays, you go to the band concerts, you go to all these different things, and you're sitting there thinking, there's kids there that are unbelievable. Unbelievable in what they do. So when we started that conversation, when we started to talk, and I kind of threw that thing out, I said, the people are just doing individual things. They weren't doing a composite of everything. And like I said, so as we started to have that discussion and threw those ideas out a little bit, and I use that as an example, other people chimed in. Why don't we have, like somebody said, well, why don't we bring all the bands together in the fall and let them just produce their halftime shows and pick one value, whatever you want to call them, most valuable player of the band,
top band,
right, and give them a plaque for that particular thing. And it was, because we had in the beginning that they would come in the fall. It would be a Saturday when we were all off, where the bands would all come together in one stadium, and they in turn would put their halftime show on, with it as such. And then we allowed people that were in that music area to tell us who they thought was the best, with it. So from there, and as it was around there, and people were throwing these different things out, we came up with all, like I said, the beginning, the impromptu speech, the math, the civics things, and I remember the baking contest, it stuck in my mind, it was one of the band.
It was home ec cook-off back then.
Whatever it was called.
Morphed a little bit since then, we're still trying to cook some stuff up.
Right,
You also know how to do some financial math in that competition down there too.
So, just different things with it. So it was the people that were sitting around that table, they were just throwing things, and it kind of got together, and we put together what we thought was something that was unique. And it became unique. Once we got in and finally had the title of the conference, we called it Heritage, and we were telling the world what it was like, people started to say, woo, that's a hell of an idea, with it on the different ones. And it grew from there. And I'd have to handle from one of the forefront people that really took heart is John Bumble. He was kind of like the main guy, kind of being the person that did all the work on the background, I guess I would say, for many, many years, over those particular things.
John was so valuable, like the transition, like how you end up being part of the Heritage Conference board is you become a principal of a member school, or you're the AD. as you mentioned before, like the idea of the heritage is the principals are the ones that are basically the board that hold the vote. And if they're unable to be there, then they can delegate their athletic director to make the vote. But John was the secretary treasurer when I first joined, and then as I morphed into being the president, a lot of the schools that initially that we went out and we were like, not to say recruiting, but like vetting out when we had members leave and stuff like that, or we were thinking about adding, was John and I spent a lot of time traveling. But he's definitely a worker bee. He is he's certainly very instrumental in the success, not only at the beginning but even today, of what happened in the Heritage Conference. So.
There's no doubt about it. There's just, he was one of the many, and there were other ADs too, that it participated, and deserved to, to get the recognition that they have. But one of the unique things that happened with the Heritage, and I'd have to say this was with girls sports, and I'm going to use the girls basketball. I'm just get a little history on the girls basketball. Most people don't realize that back in the 60s, girls basketball was in the fall. There were 6 girls on the team. One wasn't allowed to go past midcourt. So they went from that point, they got down to where they had 5, but it was still in the fall. Mm-hmm. And I remember when the first time that I was elected to the District 6 committee, everybody has to take a sport. So they said, Stan, you take girls basketball in the fall. And the only thing that they gave me was, don't lose any money.
So is that how you ended up being the basketball chair for the whole thing?
Well,
so you started though as your first assignment was girls basketball.
Girls basketball in the fall.
I never knew that. Learned something new about you today.
In the fall. So I looked at what they were doing, and I went to some of the girls' games at the purchase line, and you'd have the parents there, and you have the cheerleaders, and you might have a couple of students, and definitely the boyfriends if there was any of the girls on the court, were there, but that was it. And I'm looking at what's happening. So here we are, we're renting the gyms, we're paying the ticket takers and the officials at all these different places. So I come up with an idea, why not bring together 3 games at one site. And I was fortunate that I had friends at Central Cambria and Hollidaysburg that allowed me to rent their gyms. And so now all of a sudden we brought them together. Now the TV will come there because it's 3 games.
Yeah, it's 3 for 1 special.
Yep, 3 for 1 special. And now all of a sudden you start to see, and then what happened was the students being students, if they think they can get on TV, they're going to come. So pretty soon somebody's seeing a group of kids from one school, we better do that or try to outdo them. Mm-hmm. And it just went from there. So I come into the meeting and I'm telling them, we made money. Well, it was like, what the heck's going on here, with it. So from there, it developed that, that they were going to be moved into the regular basketball season, okay? And at that time, it was simple. Tuesdays and Fridays were golden. They had to belong to the boys' team. Excuse me, was it Monday and Thursday, I think, were the original dates that they would belong to the girls. The Tuesday and Friday, would belong to the boys, okay? And so we as a conference decided, wait a minute here. We're going to be equal, so that we decided that we're going to rotate it, that the boys are going to play on Tuesday, but they will have some Thursday games. The girls will play on a Monday, and they will have a Friday game, because Friday was the big night, mm-hmm. People. So that was kind of like one of the first ones to do that, with mm-hmm. it as such. And we had some, during that period of time, we had some great girls team in the county, unbelievable girls teams in the county.
Oh yeah.
And even from a state level, the girls sports were looked down upon, put them wherever. And that goes to another story, and a little off the subject, but nobody wanted to take the girls' games. And so, just so happens that at that time, Marion Center was on a run. They had the
100 and some with Bob Young
and all those people.
They had
McCourt
some
from
players.
Our district was their big rivalry. On the other end of it, and the bigger league, there was Altoona and there was Penn Hills. Same thing. Nobody wanted them. Stan, you go ahead and find a place for it and have it. So I get IUP. I used IUP a lot. And normally as a game manager, and you're familiar with it, you call ahead the day before to find out what the pre-sale tickets were, so they had an idea of what to sell at the game. Well, when I added them all up, IUP legally held 2,310 people. Okay. I have close to 5,000 tickets being sold for this game. So I called down to Harrisburg, and I talking to the director down there, he says, well, Stan, what are we going to do? And I says, well, I got 2 local teams that I know. I said, we can play them last. Let's get the teams from Altoona and Penn Hill, play them first. I'll clear out the gym. And then I know the principals from those 2 schools, and they can keep their people outside until it's time to come in. Believe it or not, we filled that baby up probably more than what the fire code would allow us for the first game, emptied it out, brought in the second one. What happened was that all of a sudden people in the state said, uh-oh, something's going on here where people are getting interested that you're selling out, stadiums. So that went along with our thought process that we were, with the Heritage Conference, the same thing, of giving equality, if you want to use that term, for them.
I think to go back then real quick, so back to the academics with Patty and stuff like that, and we formed those. And I think that the uniqueness of the Heritage Conference, I think one of the things that's great about it is like, and you said it, it's like we have so much talent, and our responsibilities as principals are to create great experiences, not only through the conference, but within our own schools. So there's no segment that we don't touch. So, we have the athletes, we have the academics, we have the arts, we recognize like those things. Now we're incorporating opportunities for kids in STEM. We're incorporating, opportunities for our special needs population. So at the beginning, when you guys were meeting in 1999, is this the vision? Could you have envisioned where we are today as a conference?
I envisioned at that time with and other principals too, our vision was that we felt that we had something special, that it would meet and it would grow. And we knew that. It would grow because there's people out there that were throwing ideas out of what we could do constantly, to improve it. And just like you just added the last thing with the special needs students, I mean, you're encompassing that whole student body, giving them an opportunity to have the same plaque that everyone else has in that building. And say what you want to. I've been fortunate enough over since I retired, the last 20 some odd years, to go over to over to your conference championships. And you'd be surprised the amount of people that I've run into that were students at the time that now are parents, and they're so grateful of the conference. I mean, you could just see the pride that's in there, with it on the different ones. And it's if you just go there and just watch all the different jackets from all the different schools, I mean, you're bringing together not only your own school, but a community of other schools out there that are very similar, and you guys have done a good job of showing off what the students have done in all different areas, which is good, and that's what you want. I think that's just something that is a unique about our conference that a lot of other conferences don't have. A lot of them are basically athletic, straight down the line. But say what you want to, that plaque, I don't care who you are, whether you're the person that won the impromptu speech, the baking contest, or whatever it may have been, they're proud as a peacock that they got that plaque, that they are the winner. Just the same with the people that won the championship, in basketball, football, track, or whatever the case may be, softball, baseball, etc. I just think it's just something that has grown. I think it's something just to sit there and be proud of when you watch that, because you say, good idea started, and it sure is a hell of a thing that we got right now.
Yeah. We got a lot of new schools. This is kind of why I wanted to do this today, is to kind of let people know the history and how it all kind of started and why it started. Because I think that if you can go back, when you're trying to make those hard decisions, or someone has an idea, I think that the best way to make those decisions is going back to, why are we here? What is our mission? Does this idea move us closer to our mission, or does it move us further from it? And I think that if we can ground ourselves on that sometimes, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this, because there's a lot of schools that have joined, like just since 2021. Portage has joined, Conemaugh Township, Conemaugh Valley. West Shamokin joined before then, but they're newer.
Cambria Heights.
Yeah, Cambria Heights came in since 2021 and stuff of that nature. So I think that, kind of getting those people, not only the schools, but also the fans and the supporters of those schools and the communities to get a better picture of what we're trying to create at the Heritage Conference, and then also trying to make them feel like welcome, that they're a member. One of the things we'll say is, it's non-negotiable that KCAC game is happening at the KCAC. It's a class venue, it's a class show, people support it, but just trying to find ways to break tradition a little bit too, and let some of the Cambria schools host a few of the things that we do. Maybe not even in athletics per se, but even in different opportunities. So that's a challenge, because you always want to take a new member and you want to kind of bring them in. So like, you never really had to go through that because the same 10 were there when you retired. But you look at now, we've not only expanded to 12, but what we've brought in. So just wanting everyone out there to know, like, this is the beginnings.
But I really believe that the conference is morphing into something that's really good. You got some great ideas, the newer ideas that come along, but that's the way it's supposed to be. People sitting there coming up with other things to highlight students that are in those buildings. And you have to realize too that when you start getting other schools that want to come, they're coming to your thing and say, boy, I want to join that group. You know what I'm saying? That is something in itself. The key thing is you got to have a reminder that we're all in it together. We're all going to do this, and stay to that core couple of principles. And if they accept that, then it'll be okay. But if they start to wonder, well, I only can do this or I can't. No, we're in this together. You're going to have a math competition, find us some math people. Whatever the case may be, and just go with it.
I always wonder too, like, one of the challenges I think I face as president is we do get people that do want to consider coming to the Heritage. And one of the things we look at obviously is, what do they have and all the things we offer? I mean, you don't have to have everything.
No.
I don't have a wrestling team.
Or a soccer team.
Yeah, or a soccer team,
right.
But we do have schools that do. But also, I go back to the conversation about the Appalachian Conference, okay? Like, sometimes I wonder how big is too big. We think
Yes.
about that, and it's like now with schools, now co-ops being a lot more prevalent because of declining enrollments. So those are some of the challenges that the Heritage Conference faces, is that and that's why and then people talk about, like you talked about, being a small school conference, which we are. Now with 6 classifications, you talk about single A and double A. I still consider both small schools.
No question about it.
But so you get people that may advocate for, well, single A should play single A and double. But my remark to those people is, who would you want us to play? Because take football, for instance, we have 7 and 5, but let's just say we had 6 and 6. So you play only your division, your classification, that's 5 games. Where are you getting the other 5? Because conferences are so prevalent now. You have Laurel Highlands near us, okay, their schedules encapsulated within their conference. The ICC, their schedules so that's why I feel like it's really a challenge when you want to start having those conversations, because 2 things you want to keep in touch is, one is the Heritage itself. I can't imagine a day when Homer Center isn't playing River Valley. I mean, that's a rival, okay? Like when I went to Penns Manor, I couldn't imagine not playing Purchase Line.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at Purchase Line, I couldn't imagine not playing Penns Manor. Okay, so the idea is kind of keeping that intact as well, and making it vibrant. And I think that's why I'm so appreciative of the Laurel Highlands and the ICC, because we maintain such great relationships with them, just like we used to when before the Westpac did end up, moving away from some things. We used to have such a great relationship, and I think those relationships are so important to keep.
Well, one of the things that is an argument for those people that want to go A and double A, you have to understand that every 2 years there's reclassification. How does that reclassification come about? It's simple.
Enrollment.
You put all the enrollments in there, and the computer comes out, and I'm just going to say that I'm going to use 600 as a number. It's not that case. We got 600 teams for football. That computer's going to put 100 teams in 6A, 100 teams in 5A, 100 teams here, 100 teams here, 100 teams here. Now, it will tell you that the cutoff point for that was, let's stay down at the bottom, was 150 students for 2026. When they do it in 2028, it might be a different number.
Might be 175. It might be
right,
might be 105.
Because what they're doing is breaking it down across the state, with the different things. And so it's very possible that in the conference, at one time you could be double A, and then next year single A. Now you mean I can't play? You know what I'm saying? So that's the reason. You're small schools. You got the same. When you look at it, you're in the same environment. I mean, we're all run with the same problems. You know what I'm saying is declining enrollment, those type of things. And a lot of the declining enrollment that's coming about, if you just take a look around, and most people don't even take this into consideration. And I'm going to use the Amish community. They've come into this area that wasn't there when I was a principal up until 2003. Their kids, there's lots of them, they're going to their own schools. You've always had a fundamentalist Christian community that had their own schools in our area. And so the population is declining, with it. Public schools are, you take what's there and that's it. What's left over, if I'm going to use that term. I hate to say it that way, but that's basically what happens.
That's true.
And so you can't control that. And so when you start talking numbers of how many boys and how many girls, and it's going to go. There's a year where you have more boys than the girls, and a year where there's more girls than boys, and you can't control those things.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I worry about a lot is like a school like Tacoma Center, for instance. The more that we try to offer kids in different sports, we'll use that as an example, is like I have 7th and 8th grade, both of my population's total students is 50 or less. So now when you're offering junior high volleyball, junior high basketball, cheerleading, and you offer all these things, there's only so many kids to fill the spots, and then all of a sudden you end up, that's why I think co-ops really start becoming very important and prevalent, is because of that. Nobody wants to lose their identity, and I think one of the reasons like a co-op that United has, a few of them, one with Black Lake Valley for football, why that works, I think they both needed each other at the right time. Mm-hmm. Like co-ops that are forced where one has the upper hand on the other sometimes just don't cut it. And so there's a lot of challenges ahead, and I go back to what I said earlier, if we stay true to our mission and what we're trying to do, I think that's the thing. And then also, I think I'd be really amiss if I didn't make a shout out to First Commonwealth Bank. They've been a great sponsor of the Heritage Conference for the last several years. And even at the beginning of our basketball tournament, when we did the Appalachian Bowl, First Commonwealth Bank was that sponsor, like the 2.0 reboot. And then at our beginnings, when we started the KCAC, S&T Bank was our sponsor for basketball. When S&T Bank, it kind of was almost a perfect storm when S&T Bank stepped out as a sponsor. That was right when the Appalachian Bowl kind of was coming to an end, and First Commonwealth Bank stepped in and filled that role. And we've had other sponsors, but those are really the two primary, because when you're trying to create events like that, unfortunately, money does come to be a problem and a question. But because of those sponsorships, then the money that we generate, especially from the KCAC event, the money that we generate, 100% of that goes back into doing these things that we do for kids, giving them, those awards, the trophies, the plaques, the certificates, And also just being able, like, when someone comes into the conference, we give you a $500 kit to build your first robot, to compete. So there's so many things there, and so that's why out there, and it's hard because you get these sponsors, but they also are sponsoring their local school
Schools, right.
and stuff with that nature. So, anybody out there that's sponsoring a lot of schools at one shot, Heritage Conference, we're always open to conversations for sure. All right, Terry, I'm going to ask you, you're over there, what question didn't we ask that you think we should ask?
Just one thing that, like, you're very proud of that you want to see continue on.
I would have to say that dealing with all the academic students, and covering all the facets of your student body. I think that's something that has to be the core idea. I mean, you just can't say that this segment's more important than this segment. You've got to look at the whole total composition, and that's the crew. And you're in it, like I said, you're in it with all of us.
Yeah, and am I allowed to answer that question
absolutely.
too, Terry? And I would say I agree, and I would say it this way, is that we continue to put the same amount of passion into academics and the arts that we put into athletics. I mean, because like we said, most people associate a conference with sports, and we do a lot of great things with sports, and we put a lot of passion into it. But the one thing, as I come closer to the end of my career, that I've mentioned in several meetings, is that I really want to make sure, and this is why I think principals need to be involved. Principals have a responsibility not only to the conference but to their own schools, that every kid is somebody that matters, and every kid needs to have the best possible experience in their educational journey. And so to me is just the passion that we place on all three of our core areas, academics, athletics, and arts. That is going to assure the survival of the Heritage Conference regardless of what storms we have to weather.
And I think that with your podcast, you have such a wide range of topics that you can put on there that people are going to want to listen to. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the audience that's out there, I mean, whether you're talking about your robots, whether you're talking about your impromptu speech, whatever the case may be, I mean, it's there. I mean, and people will be interested in what's going on and why it's going on. And there's a lot of history and a lot of things that were done that really were progressive, if you want to use the term, for the thinking at that time, of what people, you think. I mean, I remember there were some people, girls basketball, I wouldn't even waste my time going to it. And you can see that, I mean, it's there. Yeah. I mean, the people, you build it and it will come, as the saying goes. Well,
and I think that when you talked about it earlier, and I'd like to dive into that deeper at another time, is the idea of, like, when you brought the matchups into IUP and you started making a 3-for-1 special event and stuff like that. Because I remember, like, I coached girls basketball at Purchase Line for 3 years, and I remember you told me, like, I went in and I saw, I think it was Cranberry was really good at the time, and they were at IUP and they were playing in the final to go to the state championship. And you're like, you got to go to this thing. So you hooked me up. I went in and checked that out. And I think that's one of the things, too, that's nice about the KCAC is just seeing what that takes and what level that is. And so, and like, we're always trying to encourage our coaches and stuff, like, bring your teams in. Obviously, we got some teams in the Heritage right now that I think are up and coming that have younger teams that maybe they're not there yet, but they should be and will be. And it's like, bring that group in and let them see what this could be. And that's a great motivator for kids.
The atmosphere that's created and everything, I mean, you just can't beat it. I mean, there's no question about it. And people will come. One thing about small community schools and the group that we have, the whole community will come out.
Yeah.
I mean, guarantee people that never went to a game in their lives are going to be there. You know, I mean, it becomes a social thing for the whole community.
It's one of the things I do miss in District 6 playoffs, to be honest, is, you know, I love those triple headers and stuff like that. And
But they don't
now,
have 'em.
and there's a lot of reasons I'm obviously privy to that because
Right.
I'm a part of the District 6 committee, but it's like, I miss those because two things. It brought a lot of people together, but it also put kids in a position where they're playing in front of some crowds that
Right.
you know, because that's
Never would have it by themselves.
as a person that's, you know, played in some big games, you know, when I played, and it's just like going in and playing in front of a packed gym. There's nothing better than that. I mean, it's exciting. You feed off of it, and you know, and it's also that too. It's when the community gets behind their team. You know, and there's so many changes with like technology, media. You know, media is good in the sense that, you know, we're really showcasing our kids. It's bringing people to see events that maybe can't get out anymore to see them, and that's a great thing. But also, it's sometimes too. It does, in my opinion, sometimes you're losing some people, and it's not even about the revenue. It's just about the people in the stands and there, and to me, so it's just like it's. You know, it's a friend and used properly, but I do still think it's the idea of generating that excitement. And when you make it, it's, you know, I hate to say the word hype because I don't think you need to hype really anything. If it's good, it's good, and people will come if it's good. So, anything else, Terry?
If there's one word that you could use to describe the conference, do you have one word that sticks out to you?
One word, huh? Compatibility. You know, that you're together as a group. You know, you're going to see the whole organization, you know, for what it is and what it provides for the students. I think that's the best word I think of right now, just looking at it. Pretty tough one.
I might have to use two, but I'll say,
Okay.
I'd say this. I'm going to add a word behind it. You say, so what one word? The question is one word that
best describes the conference.
I have to use two. Kids first.
Kids, that's a good one. That's an excellent one.